I'm trying something a little different this time. I am now BTEC Kano. You know, it's pretty good. I've got a heart, I've got the knives. It's BTEC, you're not allowed to laugh. Right, so, a common sentiment I see with my videos, particularly when I put out a really good MK Wasted Potential, I see it with other series too. I've seen it with, I think, Tekken, Soul Calibur, of course, Injustice, is where people will say that I should be writing for whatever game company it is, or writing for a game company in general. Particularly with NetherRealm, usually, why isn't this man been hired for NetherRealm? You know, it's kind of like, you know, the meme where someone does Unreal Engine 4, what this series would look like on this engine, and people just like, hire this man. It's like, no. It's kind of like that, but I feel like just a little bit more justified. Just a bit. Not a lot more, but just a bit, you know, because people will say, well, the current writers are bad, so we need someone who's better, and this person has proven he can write better. But I do wonder when it comes to stuff like that, how many of those people are saying that because they've watched A Wasted Potential versus how many have actually read my MK stories? Or how many of those people have read MK Chronicles, so they actually know what my MK writing is actually like and not just my ideas? Because there's a big difference between concept and execution, as we all know from modern MK. You know, there are times when you look at some things and think, well, this could be an interesting idea. Like some of the stuff involving Chronica could theoretically have worked, but the execution was horrendous. Then you have certain retcons and certain new ideas, and you think that could have worked, but it just didn't. Like the Combat Kids were a decent idea. They're really underwritten. Yeah, the whole thing with Jax, honestly, Jax's whole story in MK11, that could have worked. It's just it wasn't handled particularly well. It was kind of bad. And so I wonder how many people have actually read my MK Chronicles stories and they're basing the idea on that, saying, well, here's what his writing of MK is like. I like this. Therefore, he should write for MK. Versus people who instead just see my ideas and say, that's all we need, so that person should write for MK. What is the ratio between those two groups of people? And so I have to question stuff like that. What is the ratio there? How many people are basing it on my actual work and how many are basing it on my ideas? Because I do appreciate that the sentiment, people think my ideas are good enough, maybe my actual writing is good enough for MK. This belt is not very long, admittedly. The idea that my stuff is good enough to be an actual MK, you know, I know the bar is not that high, to be fair, but it still means a lot that people like why my ideas for MK, the stuff I have to bring to the table. But, well, do these people really know what they're asking for? Are they just asking because of the ideas, or are they actually seeing the actual stories and see how I'd actually bring those ideas to life? I think that's an important distinction to make. Some people say, for example, the current writers needs to be fired, and we need to bring in the Force Snake and Tabok99, maybe a few other people. I think I've seen a couple who've talked about people from the Realm cast, one of those guys. I think it was Razor they suggested. Or sometimes they mention like Brusque Poet and such. Because as far as I know, Tabmot99 and Razor don't really criticise NetherRealm the way I do, and that's where I think part of the fear comes in. Because if you're familiar with Doctor Who and the Critical Lambasting, the most recent run under showrunner Chris Chibnall has gotten, then you're probably aware of that particular infamous clip of Chris Chibnall himself criticising the show from like the 80s, I think, when he was younger. And he was talking about a particular episode and the stuff he's saying about it, saying it's a very pedestrian, very basic, just a lot of running around corridors and such. And people were quick to say, wow, Chris wrote an episode just like that in his run. And so that's the thing is, because I understand that there is a big difference between my writing of MK and what's in the games. And I'm not talking about quality here, or even really the focus of it. I'm talking about the limitations. Because obviously, the people writing the actual NetherRealm product have certain things they have to stick with. The characters they can use are going to be dictated largely by the playable roster. There'll probably be a few NPCs they can throw in. Like, I'm sure they could say, well, I want to have this character in, but they're not on the roster. And Ed Boon would be like, or whoever's in charge of the finance would probably be like, yeah, sure, we can slot that character in. We can get a model made, get a voice actor to play them, fine. But that's going to be limited to only a handful of characters, you'd imagine. And that is one of the biggest limitations. And this stuff like the writer might say, well, I want to take the story in this direction. And then someone with more power, like Ed Boon or the suits at WB, might disagree. And I've even heard stories about how there were like 4 or 5 different pitches for what MK11 would be. I think it was both Dominic and Sean pitching these ideas, and all of them got turned down. And then I think I heard that the time travel thing was Ed Boon's idea. I'm not quite sure. In essence, because he's the director of the game, he gets a fair amount of say in what the actual story is going to be. And then there's the matter of, I'm sure there are people at WB who are like, this isn't very good for the brand. So, bring things back more towards what things are traditionally with MK for the brand's sake. And so, that's something that those writers have to deal with. I don't. I have total creative freedom with my MK product that is not being sold. There's no financial worry. There's no situation where you look at that and go, well, would people buy that? For me, it's a case of, this is what I would do with MK if I had total creative control. And that was actually one of the stipulations when I did my video on how I would approach MK12 with total creative control. I specifically brought that up because I knew people would bring that against me if I didn't. Because the writers don't have total creative control. They are limited by what they are allowed to do by the game's director, the people in charge of the money, various other things. Like I could write a story that just includes every single character who's ever been on an MK roster. But if that was going to be in a game, every one of those characters would need a character model and to be animated. It's why, say, a comic like Crisis on Infinite Earths just has hundreds of characters, like you have dozens in a single panel, whereas, with something animated, unless it's just like a bit where the characters are all standing there watching something, those characters all need to be animated. If it's live action, everyone needs to be brought on when they're available, trying to sync that up, make sure that all the characters are cast. Some of the characters will be played by actors who've left the show and might not be interested in coming back, or what have you. And there could be any number of things that stop this stuff from happening, but when I'm just writing an MK story for fun, I can just say, fuck it. Everybody's there. Everyone is here. And that's kind of the approach to my take on Armageddon. But like for the game, everyone needs to be actually made for the game. Everyone needs a model and to be animated. And if they're going to be actual part of the story, they need to be voice acted. And then you need animation on the faces. And there's so many things that go into it that I'm not beholden to with my stories. So that's another thing is, even if someone has read my stories and thinks, this is great, this is what I want to see in MK, are they taking into account the limitations of doing this in pretty much any other medium, where the characters need to actually have a presence as opposed to just being mentioned as being there? And there's another factor that I think is very important to keep in mind with stuff like this. And that is, I'm not sure how to put it into words as a term for it, but there is a big difference between writing the stories that I want to, that can just be a small bit of characters interacting, versus what's in the games. I've written adaptations of various scenes before. I've done an adaptation of Kung Lao's MK Gold ending. I've done an adaptation of the prison scene from MKX. And I've done Scorpion's ending for MK4 and a few others. And there are a few more that are coming up. One of the things to keep in mind with this stuff is, when it comes to actually doing it in a game, you have to keep in mind it's not a movie or a TV show, it is a game. You need to have gameplay. And while some of the stuff could work in, say, an MK RPG, like, I could write a lengthy conversation between Chujinko and another character, and then if there was a conquest RPG with dialogue choices and stuff like that, that could work, theoretically. But when it comes to the story modes of the fighting games, you don't want to be sat around waiting too long. That's a problem that sometimes comes up in these stories. Like, it's fine going from one act to the next in MK9 just because it is effectively the end of one story and the start of the next. It's fine to have a longer epilogue to Kung Lao's chapter and a longer prologue into Striker's chapter, or a longer one from the end of Liu Kang's and a longer prologue at the start of Jax's, because it's changing from one story to the next. So that's fine. The issue comes up with stuff like, say, Injustice 2, where there are points where I think it's at the end of Supergirl's chapter, I think that's it, where it's a very long scene, or from the end of Firestorm and Blue Beetle chapter. These scenes are very long. there's character stuff going on there, that's good, but they can kind of drag a bit. Some of these scenes are 17 minutes long, I think, at one point. It can get quite lengthy, and it can feel like it's just taking too long. And that's something that would not suit my style. I mean, if you're familiar with my videos or my stories or what have you, brevity is not something I do well with. I am not the kind of person who can get an idea and do it quick. I'm very extensive with the ideas. I try to do everything that I feel is necessary, which can often be a bit too much. I mean, MK11 critique, 4 hours. You know, brevity is a soul of wit does not apply to me. And that is important to keep in mind. So a lot of the ideas would have to be cut down. Probably the best example would be the prison scene in MKX. In the game, it's like a couple of minutes long, just as the characters interacting, and we can see how they're kind of starting to grow a bit closer together. We get a bit more character. Like, because this is Start Attacking this chapter, we get a bit on him to lead into his conflicts for his flashback, as well as having Jin being a bit more friendly with the others. It's very utilitarian. There's not a ton of time for stuff that is not vital to the story. In terms of the actual interactions, I mean, there's plenty of room for fights that aren't relevant to the story, but as far as the actual just character interactions, like in this scene, there's not a ton of time. Whereas you look at my story, and there's tons of it. Like this scene would go on for like 5 minutes, maybe longer, and it would just be the characters interacting. To have a decent length story mode with a decent number of fights, they only have so much time. They only have so much budget for the cutscenes, for the voice acting, the animation and such. They can only do that for so long, and so with that game having about 2 hours of cutscenes or so, you can't spend too much time on scenes like this, even though I think that it's a great way to flesh out the characters. And so that's another thing is, if I was to write for MK, I think the most beneficial thing there would be a fresh adaptation of the series in novel form, or maybe comics. Something where I'd have a lot more freedom in terms of length of time. Maybe it could work as a TV show, but as far as like the way I write MK, it wouldn't really work for the games that well, I don't think. I mean, I would still love to write for the games. It's never going to happen. Like, I've always been doubtful that anyone at NetherRealm even knows I exist, other than like the couple of times I've interacted with Sean and Dominic on Twitter. And I don't think even people sending the videos to the developers on Twitter, please don't do that. I think even when people do that, it's probably not made much of a difference. And even if people at NetherRealm do know who I am, I'm fairly certain, somehow, I get the feeling, none of them are going to be particularly eager to work with me, considering how much I tear down their work, you know? It's one of the kind of like heartbreaking things about it, I suppose. You know, I see other content creators who will get stuff from NetherRealm and Warner Bros. Early or for free, you know, whether it be DLC characters or copies of the game and stuff. That's never going to happen for me. Like, I've effectively poisoned that well. I'm never going to get to work on MK in any official capacity unless, like, somebody who got to be in a position of power appreciated my work and decided to, like, sneak me on board to work on it. Other than that very specific, very unlikely scenario, I don't think it's going to happen. So I do appreciate the sentiment that people like my stories enough that they would want me to work on MK in the future. I really appreciate it. It's just, it's never going to happen, and I don't know how well it would actually be. Like, even if I did get to work on it, because of all those limitations that I don't have when I'm making a Wasted Potential or writing MK Chronicles, it wouldn't be what you would hope it would be. This is not going to go the way you think it is. It's going to be very different. It's not going to be the thing you hope it's going to be. And I think that's very unfortunate, but it is kind of the nature of things. The best that would probably happen would be like a consulting someone. Like, they're like, well, does this feel like it fits with the MK lore? And I could say, well, no, that's wrong for this reason, or maybe, but maybe if you do it this way. But again, it's never going to happen. Speaking of my stories, I do actually have a Kano, a couple of stories that involve Kano heavily coming up. One that's about him trying to set up a next generation Black Dragon. So that's one to look forward to if I ever get around to that one. And one that kind of ties into this. You know, Su Hao chest thing that he has in the newer games. Where did he get that? Does he have a connection to Su Hao? Yes, I plan to do that as a short one. When, I don't know, because I'm currently working on tons of other stuff. Right now, I'm trying to write a Persona 5 story for Valentine's Day. I am trying to work on a big video. It's not a critique, it's something that people have wanted me to make for a long time. Maybe it's just because of the distance I'm from the camera, but with the bald cap and the beard, I feel like I kind of look like Scott Nicewander from NerdSync. Not as handsome as that fella, admittedly, but I think I look alright. And way off topic. Not the specific topic that people want me to do, but it's about something I like. And a lot of people have asked me to do videos about things I like. And so this is going to be a pretty big one. It's planned to come out by the end of March. So content until then is going to be a bit slower. You're going to see more unscripted tier list type stuff in the meantime, just because, and some short videos. There are other videos that I could make, but I'm like, that's going to take too long. I'm going to make shorter stuff until then, so I can actually try and get that video made. Hopefully it won't just like absorb 2 or 3 months of my life the way the MK11 video did. That was awful. But hopefully I can get this video done on time by March, because there's a specific reason I want to get it released by the end of that month, and then I'll be making preparations for Mortal May. Yes, I do plan to release the comparison between the different versions of MK2 sometime this year. I'm not sure when exactly. It's not currently a big priority, and I am contemplating actually implementing the adaptation stuff, putting in stuff from the Malibu comics and Battle of the Realms. I probably won't, but I am still considering it. So there's that to look forward to. And I'm thinking this year I'm probably going to have 2 decently large videos, of this one and then one later on in the year. And that's not necessarily critique, because critiques can take a very long time, but these I think are shorter, to where I could get them out like an hour long or something like that, and get them done within a decent span of time, and not have to constantly effectively halt other stuff to make them. Because that's the thing, is like, back when I was doing the critiques up to MKX. Now, I wasn't making money by then. I wasn't making money on critiques on release until the Injustice 2 one. And don't know why I sounded so weird when I said that. But with Injustice 2, that was the first one I was making money on release. Everything before that I wasn't. So with them, I could stop and like spend like a month or so working on these big videos and not put anything else out. But now that I am making money on it, I'm trying to turn this into a career, I can't. So here's the thing I need from you guys, right? So I need you to share videos with people you think would enjoy them. Also to check out videos that are not necessarily what you're here for. Like if you're just here for the MK stuff, that tends to be the stuff that does the best. It's that, Resident Evil and Persona. But please check out other stuff that I make, other videos, just because that gives me more incentive to make stuff that's not just MK. Because it's like, well, I want to make a video because I've not done anything substantial this month. Oh, this video will be a good one, but it's not MK. It's not going to do all that well, probably. I'm asking you to support me on Patreon. That would be cool, though. But I also want to know, for people not supporting me on Patreon, I asked this on Twitter last month. If you're not supporting me on Patreon, why is that? And I know how that sounds. It's like I'm saying, why not? Why are you not support? No. What it is I'm asking, if you're not supporting me on Patreon, is there a specific reason for that? And for a lot of people, it's just, I don't have the money. And that's fine. I've not seen anyone say I don't want to yet. But I'm curious if pledge tiers are part of that. Like, it's like, I want to support you with a certain tier, but I don't have the money for that, so I need to save up for it or something. And I wonder if that has anything to do with it. So, let me know what you think of the Patreon. If if you check it out, let me know what you think of it, give me feedback, so I can try and make it better. Because there are a few ideas I've been tossing around, but I want to get a feel for what people think of it currently first. What do you think of my shitty cosplay? There's always the option to go without the bald cap, because this is effectively the MKX version of MK1 Kano, but like in MK1 he wasn't bald. I know neither version has hair down here, but there's not much you can do about that. One thing I've been contemplating actually is the idea of making videos kind of explaining these shitty B-Tech MK cosplays, explaining the basics of how to make them. Because that's the beauty of MK. All the classic costumes were designed around the idea that they can make the costumes fairly cheap and dress people up in them to make the sprites. So it's not too difficult to cosplay these characters. So if you want some kind of quick explanation of what I'm using for each of these things and how to put it together yourself, let me know. Just know that this Phantom of the Opera mask covers an entire nostril. I don't know why it does that. I assume the more expensive ones would actually have a hole there, a hole drilled in, but these ones are cheaper, so they don't bother. Yeah, so let me know what you think about that. Let me know what you think about all the stuff I mentioned. Oh, the video stopped recording. Oh, I ran out of space on my phone. Great, yeah. That's just wonderful, that. But, yeah, so do the things, you know, to generate content, watch more of the stuff that you might not necessarily normally watch. And, yeah, hopefully you'll enjoy the stuff I have to put out. Please give feedback. I need it because, you know, I've been at this shit for over 15 years and I feel like I'm not nearly at the level I should be for someone who's been around as long as I have. So please help me to get better. And because I want to reach 100,000 subscribers before the end of this year, but I'm probably not going to make it. Help, please. I need help. I just want that plaque to show that everything I've been doing for half of my life has actually led towards something. I've actually accomplished something with my fucking worthless life. Please.